The home we choose 8 months after his rescue. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Wandering Star as they approached the edge of human space. The war that had raged for nearly a year was finally ending, borders were opening. And for the first time since his escape pod had been found, he had the option to return to his own species. The news had come through subspace communications 3 days ago, delivered by a weary-looking human diplomat on a scratchy transmission. The sovereignty war was over, civilian traffic could resume, and any human citizens displaced during the conflict were welcome to return home with full transportation assistance. "Quite a sight," Captain Velmore commented, his ancient voice thoughtful as they watched the distant lights of Meridian Station growing larger on the main screen. "I have not seen a human space station in many years." Marcus nodded, but his attention was on the woman standing beside him. Zara Ka had been unusually quiet since the transmission arrived, her normally expressive skin showing only muted patterns of contemplation. Through their biomechanical connection, he could feel her carefully controlled emotions: sadness, fear, resignation, and underneath it all, a deep love that made his chest ache. "The station commander is requesting permission to board," Communications Officer Yixten reported. "They wish to speak with a human refugee?" "Grant permission," Velmore replied. "Prepare the docking bay for human environmental standards." As the bridge crew dispersed to handle the docking procedures, Marcus found himself alone with Zaraka in the observation alcove. She stood with her back to him, watching the station grow larger through the transparent aluminum windows. "You're going to leave," she said softly, not turning around. "I haven't decided anything yet," Marcus replied, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. He'd been thinking about little else since the transmission arrived. "You should go," Zaraka continued, her voice carefully neutral. "This is your chance to return to your people, to rebuild your life among your own species. The war is over. You can go home." Marcus moved to stand beside her, studying her profile in the starlight. "What if I don't want to go home?" Finally, she turned to look at him, and he saw tears glistening in her dark eyes, a very human expression of emotion that she'd learned from him. "Marcus, we have known from the beginning that this was temporary. A beautiful moment stolen from time, but not something that could last forever." "Why not?" "Because you are human, and humans belong with humans. Because someday you will want children, a family, a life that I cannot give you. Because you will grow old and die while I remain young, and the pain of that will destroy me." The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Marcus reached for her hand, but she pulled away, wrapping her forearms around herself in a gesture of self-protection he'd never seen from her before. "Zaraka, look at me," he said gently. When she didn't respond, he stepped closer, close enough that she couldn't avoid his gaze. "I love you. Not some idealized version of you, not a temporary substitute for something else, you, exactly as you are." "Love is not always enough," she whispered, before Marcus could respond. The ship's communication system chimed with an announcement. The human delegation had arrived and was requesting an immediate meeting with him. With a heavy heart, he kissed Zaraka's forehead and left to meet his fate. Commander Sarah. Chun was a career diplomat with sharp eyes and an efficient manner that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of the military bureaucracy he'd left behind. She sat across from him in the ship's small conference room, flanked by 2 aides and a folder full of official documents. "Mr. Rivera," she began without preamble, "I'm here to offer you immediate passage back to human space. Full resettlement assistance and compensation for your losses during the war. The transport ship New Horizon is waiting to depart as soon as we conclude this meeting." "That's very generous," Marcus replied carefully. "But I'm not sure I'm ready to leave yet." Commander Chun's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm afraid I don't understand. You've been stranded in alien space for 8 months. Surely you want to return to civilization?" "This is civilization," Marcus said, gesturing around the ship. "These people saved my life, gave me a home, made me part of their family. I can't just abandon that." "Mr. Rivera," one of the aides interjected, "you're suffering from a documented psychological condition called Stockholm Syndrome. It's common among hostages and displaced persons who become emotionally attached to their captors. With proper treatment. I'm not a hostage, Marcus interrupted, his voice hard. I'm a crew member. I chose to be here. Commander Chun leaned forward, her expression sympathetic but firm. Marcus, may I call you Marcus? You've been through a traumatic experience. It's natural to feel grateful to these people who helped you. But you need to think about your future. What kind of life can you have here? You can't marry one of them. You can't have a normal family. You'll always be an outsider. I'm already married to one of them, Marcus said quietly, enjoying the shocked looks on the human faces, bonded in their tradition. And I've never felt more at home anywhere in my life. The meeting continued for another hour, with the humans offering increasingly generous incentives for his return. Citizenship on a new colony world, a position with the merchant marine, even a substantial cash settlement. But Marcus found himself thinking not about what they were offering, but about what he would be leaving behind after the delegation finally departed. Promising to return the next day for his final decision, Marcus wandered the ship aimlessly. The wandering star felt different somehow, as if the presence of the human officials had highlighted just how alien his new home truly was. The bioluminescent corridors, the organic curves of the bulkheads, the subtle hum of the ship's living systems, all of it felt simultaneously foreign and precious. He found most of the crew gathered in the central garden, their skin glowing with the soft patterns that indicated a community discussion. As he approached, the conversations died away, and he realized they'd been talking about him. Please, he said, settling into the circle, don't stop on my account. I assume you're discussing whether I should leave. Elder Kixval, one of the ship's senior engineers, spoke up. We are discussing whether we should ask you to stay, he said with characteristic Zephyrian directness. Your presence has been beneficial to our community, but we do not wish to be selfish if returning to your people would make you happier. You've given me a life here, Marcus said, looking around the circle of alien faces that had become dear to him. A purpose, a family, a home. How could I be happier anywhere else? But you are human, young Tixmare pointed out. Do you not miss your own kind? Your own culture? Marcus considered the question seriously. I miss some things, he admitted. Human music, certain foods, the feeling of rain on a planet with a real atmosphere. But I've gained so much more than I've lost. I've learned to see the universe through different eyes, to think in new ways, to be part of something larger than myself. The discussion continued long into the ship's night cycle, with various crew members sharing their thoughts and concerns, some worried about the challenges Marcus would face as a permanent outsider. Others spoke about the ways he'd already changed their community for the better. All of them expressed genuine care for his well-being. Finally, Captain Velmore raised one of his hands for silence. The decision is not ours to make, he said solemnly. Marcus must choose his own path. We can only promise that whatever he decides, he will always be welcome among us. As the gathering dispersed, Marcus noticed that Zaraka had been absent from the discussion. He found her in the medical bay, working late on routine maintenance of the biomechanical systems. She looked up when he entered, her skin showing faint patterns of forced calm. How did the meeting with your people go? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. They want me to come back, Marcus said, settling on the edge of her workstation. They've made some very generous offers, and you are tempted? I'm terrified, Marcus admitted. Not of going back, but of making the wrong choice. Of hurting you or disappointing the crew? Or throwing away something precious for the sake of duty to a species that never really knew what to do with me anyway. Zaraka set down her tools and turned to face him fully. What does your heart tell you? That home isn't a place, Marcus said, echoing her words from months ago. It's the people you choose to be with. They worked together in comfortable silence for the next hour, Marcus holding tools and components while Zaraka made delicate adjustments to the medical scanners. It was peaceful, domestic work that had become precious to him over the past months. Finally, as she sealed the last access panel, Zaraka spoke. I have been thinking about what you said, she said softly. about making our time count, regardless of how much of it we have. And? And I realized that I've been focusing on the ending instead of the beginning. We may only have 50 or 60 years together, but those could be the richest, most meaningful years of my life. She turned to meet his gaze. If you want them to be... Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that I would rather have 50 years of happiness with you than 300 years without you. I'm saying that if you choose to stay, I will spend every day grateful for that choice. And if I choose... The connection 3 months aboard the Wandering Star had transformed Marcus from a desperate refugee into something approaching a crew member. He'd learned enough of the Zephyrian language to follow basic conversations, could navigate the ship's biomechanical systems with confidence, and had even started to think in terms of cycles and flows rather than rigid schedules. But it was his growing relationship with Zaraka that truly marked his integration into this alien world. The change became obvious during the Midlight Festival, a Zephyrian celebration that occurred when their ship's biorhythms aligned with certain stellar formations. Marcus watched from the observation deck as the crew gathered in the ship's central garden, their skin glowing with bioluminescent patterns that appeared during times of joy and celebration. It is beautiful, is it not? Zaraka appeared beside him, her own skin decorated with swirling patterns of silver and blue light. Incredible, Marcus breathed. I had no idea your people could do that. It happens when we are deeply content, she explained. When we feel truly at home with those around us. She paused, then added quietly, you should join us. The festival is for everyone aboard this ship. I'm not Zephyrian. I can't glow like that. Zaraka smiled, an expression that had become precious to Marcus over the past months. Light comes in many forms. Your presence is enough. She took his hand, her 4 fingers intertwining with his 5 in a gesture that had become natural between them. As they walked toward the celebration, Marcus noticed how the other crew members welcomed him without question, making space in their circle, offering him traditional foods and drinks. Captain Velmore approached as the evening progressed, his ancient skin glowing with complex patterns that spoke of deep wisdom and contentment. Human Marcus, he said formally, you have become valued member of our crew. If you wish, we would make this official. Marcus looked around the circle of alien faces, all watching him with warm acceptance. What would that mean exactly? You would be granted full crew status, with all rights and responsibilities. Your name would be added to our ship's heart. Velmore gestured toward the biomechanical core that powered and guided their vessel. You would be Zephyrian by choice, if not by birth. The offer hit Marcus harder than he'd expected. These people were offering him not just sanctuary, but belonging. True belonging, of the kind he'd never quite found even among his own species. Yes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, I accept. The formal ceremony took place at ship's dawn. Marcus placed his hand on the warm, living surface of the ship's heart while Captain Velmore spoke ancient words in the old tongue. He felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if the ship itself was acknowledging him, accepting him into its biological matrix. Afterward, Zaraka approached with a small device in her hands. This is for you, she said, offering him what looked like a piece of living jewelry, a biomechanical bracelet that pulsed with gentle light. It will help you understand ship communications, she explained as she fastened it around his wrist. But more than that, it connects you to all of us. You will feel what we feel in small ways. You will know when someone is hurt or afraid or joyful. As the bracelet sealed itself to his skin with a warm, tickling sensation, Marcus suddenly felt the crew around him in a way he'd never experienced before. It wasn't telepathy exactly, more like an awareness of their emotional states, their well-being. And strongest of all was his connection to Zaraka herself. This is how you've been taking care of me, he realized. You've been feeling my emotions all along. Zaraka's skin flushed with patterns of embarrassment. It is part of being a medical officer. I monitor the crew's health through emotional and physical indicators. But with you? She paused, looking down at her hands. With you, it became more personal than it should have been. What do you mean? I began to care too much, she admitted softly. To want to comfort you not just as a doctor, but as someone who had grown fond of you. Marcus felt his heart race, and through the bracelet he sensed Zaraka's reaction to his emotional spike. The feedback loop was gentle but undeniable. She could feel his growing excitement, and he could sense her nervous anticipation. Zaraka, he said carefully, what exactly are the customs around relationships between different species? There are no formal restrictions, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Love is love, regardless of the form it takes. But bonding between species is rare. The differences in biology and lifespan and social structure, it can be difficult, but not impossible? She met his eyes then, and he saw his own hope reflected in her dark gaze. Not impossible? No. Their first kiss happened 2 weeks later, during a quiet evening in the ship's secondary garden. Marcus had been helping Zaraka tend to the medicinal plants when she accidentally knocked over a container of nutrient solution. As they both bent to clean it up, their faces came close together, and the moment stretched between them like a held breath. Marcus, she whispered, and he could feel her nervousness through their connection, mixed with something deeper and warmer. Is this okay? He asked, raising one hand to touch her cheek. Her skin was softer than he'd expected, warm and smooth with those subtle ridges that marked her alien nature. Yes, she breathed, and leaned into his touch. Their lips met gently. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Her mouth was different from a human woman's, slightly larger, with a tongue that was longer and more flexible, but the feeling of connection, of rightness, was unmistakable when they finally broke apart. Zaraka's skin was glowing with soft patterns of gold and pink that Marcus instinctively understood meant happiness and desire. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. No, she said with a small laugh. I could feel it through the connection, just as you can probably feel that I wanted it too. Indeed, through the biomechanical link. Marcus could sense her emotions as clearly as his own, the joy, the relief, the growing warmth that promised deeper feelings to come, but their developing relationship wasn't without its challenges. A few days after their first kiss, Zaraka seemed distant and troubled. Marcus found her in the medical bay, staring at a data tablet with a frown creasing her features. What's wrong? He asked, settling beside her on the biomechanical bench that adjusted automatically to support both their bodies. I have been researching human Zephyrian biological compatibility, she said without looking up. The differences are ... significant. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. What kind of differences? Our life cycles are not aligned, she explained, finally meeting his gaze. Humans live approximately 80 to 100 standard years. My people live 3 to 4 times that long. If we commit to each other, I will watch you age and die while I remain young. The thought hadn't occurred to Marcus, and now it hit him like a physical blow. How old are you now? 73 standard years. Still quite young by my people's standards. You would be middle-aged and elderly and gone while I'm still in what you would call my prime. They sat in silence for a long moment, both processing the implications. Finally, Marcus took her hand in his, feeling the familiar warmth of her skin. Does that change how you feel about me? He asked quietly. No, she admitted. If anything, it makes every moment more precious. But Marcus, I do not know if I can bear to love someone knowing I will lose them so soon. And I don't know if it's fair to ask you to, Marcus replied honestly. But Zaraka, I can't change how I feel about you any more than you can change how you feel about me. Maybe the time we have is what matters, not how much of it there is. Over the following days, they talked extensively about their situation. Marcus learned more about Zephyrian bonding customs, how they typically formed multi-generational relationships within their own species, connections that could last for centuries. The idea of a love affair that would burn bright and brief was foreign to them, but as they spent more time together, both began to realize that what they were building was worth the eventual pain of loss. Zaraka showed Marcus the star charts that guided their ship's wandering path, teaching him to read the biomechanical navigation systems. Marcus shared stories of Earth, of human art and literature, of the strange beauty of a species that lived fast and burned bright. "Your people fascinate me," Zaraka said one evening as they sat together in Marcus's quarters, her head resting against his shoulder. "You know your lives are short, and yet you love so fiercely, create so passionately. You build things knowing they will outlast you." "Maybe that's why," Marcus suggested. "Because we know our time is limited, we try to make it count." "Is that what this is?" she asked softly. "Making it count?" "This is me loving you," Marcus said simply. "For however long we have." The crew's acceptance of their relationship was gradual but complete. Marcus noticed the subtle changes first, the way conversations paused when he and Zaraka entered a room together, the knowing looks, the small accommodations made for their growing bond. No one seemed disapproving. If anything, there was a sense of curiosity and even approval. Captain Velmore confirmed this during a private conversation in his quarters. The ancient Zephyrion had summoned Marcus ostensibly to discuss supply manifests, but the conversation quickly turned to more personal matters. "The crew speaks well, oh." The escape captain Marcus Rivera had been drifting in the escape pod for 17 days when the salvage ship found him. His water recycler was failing, the protein bars were down to crumbs, and the oxygen scrubber made an ominous clicking sound every few minutes. When the airlock sealed and breathable atmosphere flooded his tiny metal coffin, he thought he was hallucinating the tall, graceful figure standing in the doorway. She was beautiful in an alien way that made his breath catch. Her skin had a subtle blue-silver sheen like moonlight on water, and her eyes were large and dark, almost black, with vertical pupils that contracted when she looked at him. 4 arms moved with fluid precision as she worked the controls of a medical scanner, her movements economical and sure. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Human male, approximately 30 standard years, severe dehydration, mild radiation exposure, psychological stress from isolation. She recorded her findings in a language he didn't recognize, then switched to accented but clear standard. "You are safe now. I am Zaraka, Chief Medical Officer of this vessel." Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the pod spun around him. "My ship, the Prometheus. Raiders hit us near the outer rim. I was the only one who made it to the pods." His voice came out as a croak. Zaraka's expression softened, and she placed one of her hands on his shoulder while another prepared an IV line. "Rest now. We will discuss what happened after you have recovered." The next few days passed in a haze of medical treatment and gradual recovery. The ship, Marcus learned, was called the Wandering Star, and it was crewed entirely by Zephyrians, a species he'd only heard about in trader stories. They were nomads, traveling from system to system, trading, exploring, and apparently rescuing stranded humans. Zaraka visited him regularly during his recovery. At first, their conversations were purely medical, checking his vital signs and monitoring his progress. But gradually they began to talk about other things. She was curious about human culture, about Earth, about the war that had driven so many humans to the Outer Rim territories. Marcus found himself looking forward to her visits, watching for the subtle changes in her expression when she was amused or concerned. "Your species is fascinating," she said one day while reviewing his blood work. "Humans seem to thrive in the most unlikely circumstances. Most beings would have died in that pod within a week, but you lasted more than 2. "We're stubborn," Marcus replied with a weak smile. "My grandfather used to say that humans are too dumb to know when we're beaten." Zaraka tilted her head. A gesture he was learning meant she was processing something unexpected. "That is not stupidity. That is strength." The Wandering Star was unlike any ship Marcus had ever seen. Where human vessels were all function and efficiency, this ship felt alive. Bioluminescent panels provided soft, changing light that followed natural rhythms. The corridors curved and branched like the inside of a vast organism, and everywhere he looked, there were growing things, plants that served both decorative and functional purposes. Filtering air and providing food and medicine, the crew was small. Maybe 20 Zephyrians total, and they all seemed to know each other intimately. They moved together like a family, sharing tasks without discussion, communicating as much through subtle body language as through words. Marcus felt like an outsider watching a dance he didn't know the steps to. Captain Velmore was ancient even by Zephyrian standards. His silver-blue skin marked with intricate patterns that Marcus learned were a sign of age and wisdom among his people. When Marcus was finally well enough to leave the medical bay, the captain summoned him to the bridge. "Human Marcus Rivera," Velmore said in a voice like distant thunder. "You are welcome aboard our ship for as long as you wish to stay. We ask only that you contribute as you are able." "I'm grateful, Captain, but I should arrange transport back to human space. There are stations I could work at, find passage on a cargo hauler." Velmore exchanged a look with Zaraka, who had accompanied Marcus to the bridge. "Human space is currently engaged in what you call the Sovereignty War. The borders are closed. No civilian traffic is permitted." Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his world. He'd known the conflict was escalating when the Prometheus left port, but if the borders were closed, that meant full-scale warfare had begun. His family, his friends, everyone he'd ever known was trapped behind battle lines he couldn't cross. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Unknown," Velmore replied. "Perhaps months. Perhaps years. Wars have a way of lasting longer than anyone expects." That night, Marcus stood alone in the observation lounge, watching the stars wheel past through the transparent aluminum windows. Everything he'd known, everything he'd planned for his life, was gone. He was truly alone now, more alone than he'd ever been in the escape pod. "You are not alone," a soft voice said behind him. He turned to find Zaraka approaching, carrying a steaming mug in each of her 4 hands. She offered one to him. It smelled of cinnamon and something floral he couldn't identify. "Zephyrian comfort drink," she explained. "We drink it when the path ahead is unclear." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, sipping the warm beverage and watching the starfield. Marcus found himself studying Zaraka's reflection in the window. The way the bridge lights caught the subtle patterns in her skin, the graceful curve of her neck. "Your people," he said eventually. "You don't have permanent homes, do you? You just wander." "Home is not a place for us," Zaraka replied. "It is the people we choose to travel with. The ship becomes home because those we care about are aboard." "I've never thought of it that way. Humans We tend to get attached to places. Cities, countries, planets. We plant flags and build monuments and try to make everything permanent." Zaraka turned to look at him directly. "And yet you adapted to life aboard our ship in just a few days." "Perhaps humans are more flexible than you think." Over the following weeks, Marcus found his place aboard the Wandering Star. His engineering background proved useful. Human technology was different from Zephyrian biotech, but the principles were often similar. He helped repair damaged systems after a rough jump, redesigned the waste recycling system for better efficiency, and even taught some of the crew basic human languages, but it was his relationship with Zaraka that truly anchored him to the ship. She continued to check on his health, but their conversations ranged far beyond medical matters. She taught him about Zephyrian history, their complex social structures, their philosophy of constant motion and change. He told her about Earth, about human literature and music, about the small town where he'd grown up before joining the Merchant Marine. "You miss it very much," she observed one day after he described his childhood home. "Less than I thought I would," Marcus admitted, surprising himself. "I thought I'd be desperate to get back, but I don't know. Life here is different, but it's not bad. Your people have been incredibly kind to me." "You have been good for us as well," Zaraka said. "You see things differently. Yesterday, when you suggested using the thermal regulators to create microclimates in the hydroponics bay, Engineer Kixval said it was the most elegant solution to that problem he'd seen in decades." Marcus felt a warm glow at the compliment. "I just looked at it from a different angle." "Yes," Zaraka agreed. That is what you do. You make us see things differently. Their friendship deepened gradually. Marcus learned that Zephyrians didn't form romantic bonds the way humans did. Their relationships were more fluid, based on deep emotional and intellectual connection rather than exclusive physical attraction. Zaraka had been bonded to another medical officer years ago, but he died in an accident and she'd been traveling alone ever since. Do you ever get lonely? Marcus asked one evening as they worked together in the medical bay, cataloging supplies. Sometimes, she admitted. But loneliness is different for my people than for yours, I think. We are always connected to the crew, the ship. But sometimes I miss having someone who truly knows me, who I can share my private thoughts with. Marcus felt something twist in his chest at her words. Over the past month he'd found himself thinking about Zaraka more and more. The way she hummed softly while working, the careful precision of her movements, the gentleness in her voice when she spoke to him. He was attracted to her, he realized, in a way that went beyond physical appearance. I know what you mean, he said quietly. Even surrounded by people, you can feel alone if there's no one who really understands you. Their eyes met across the medical bay, and for a moment Marcus thought he saw something deeper than friendship in her dark gaze. But then she looked away, focusing intently on the supply inventory. We should finish this, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Captain Velmore wants the supply report by ship's morning. That night, Marcus lay in his small but comfortable quarters, staring at the ceiling that pulsed gently with bioluminescent light. He was falling for an alien woman, and he had no idea if such feelings could ever be reciprocated. Worse, he was completely dependent on her people's generosity, a refugee with nowhere else to go. The last thing he wanted was to make anyone uncomfortable, but as the days passed, he found it harder and harder to ignore the growing connection between them. Zaraka seemed to seek out his company, finding excuses to woe.